By daylight, Columbus feels like a city built on peace, but when darkness falls, it breathes in murder. A woman's birthday ended in silence behind a locked apartment door. A lover's body was found dismembered beneath garage lights. A bartender collapsed under fists on a blood-stained sidewalk. And a student's final drive ended in gunfire. Each scene etched in grief, each verdict a whisper too late, because justice may bind the guilty, but it can never unbury the dead. And this is Inside Columbus's Darkest Black Killers, Shocking Murders, and True Crime Documentary. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Anthony Pardon. Under the quiet winter air of Columbus, a young woman's birthday turned from celebration to horror, leaving investigators tracing the path of a predator. On the 28th of January 2018, 24-year-old Rachel Anderson, an apprentice funeral director, was found dead inside her apartment on the city's east side. The killer was identified as 54-year-old Anthony Pardon, a registered sex offender with a long record of violent crimes. What began as a quiet night alone became one of Ohio's most brutal homicide investigations in recent memory. Anderson had spent the weekend celebrating her birthday. That Sunday night, she returned home from dinner, unaware that Pardon was already nearby. Investigators determined that Pardon entered her apartment shortly after 8 p.m. He tied her wrists and ankles with cords from her own appliances, gagged her, and forced her to reveal her bank information. Detectives later found that he raped and strangled her using an electric blanket cord. A steak knife from her kitchen was driven into the back of her neck with enough force to fracture her skull. Pardon then left her body partially wrapped in a comforter, hidden inside her bedroom closet. After the killing, he stole her car, phone, and credit cards. Over the next 2 days, surveillance footage captured him driving her vehicle and using her debit cards at convenience stores. He even handed one of the cards to his sister and a homeless man to make purchases. When Anderson failed to report to work the following morning, her friend, Jonathan Kennedy, checked on her apartment and discovered her body. The Columbus Division of Police quickly launched a full-scale investigation. DNA from Pardon was found on multiple parts of Anderson's body, and cell phone records placed him at her apartment during the time of the murder. Surveillance footage, ATM records, and eyewitness statements confirmed his movements before and after the crime. Police traced his location through his sister's use of Anderson's stolen debit card, leading to his arrest on the 9th of February 2018. SWAT officers captured him without incident in the Linden neighborhood. Forensic testing sealed the case. Pardon's DNA matched the rape kit, and his phone's geolocation data aligned precisely with the murder timeline. The steak knife, discovered 2 weeks later by Anderson's mother, matched the wounds described in the autopsy. His trial began in February 2020. The prosecution relied on DNA and digital evidence, while the defense attempted to cast doubt on the timeline. After 6 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Pardon on all counts, including aggravated murder, rape, kidnapping, and aggravated burglary. Jurors deadlocked on the death penalty but recommended life without parole. Judge Stephen McIntosh sentenced him to 2 life terms plus 63 years, ensuring he would never leave prison. Raquel Anderson's parents described the system as broken, blaming authorities for releasing a known violent offender without adequate supervision. 3 lessons endure: evil repeatedly becomes systemic failure, unchecked freedom fuels tragedy, and justice delayed still demands permanence. Somewhere beyond the prison walls, the silence around her birthday still holds its breath. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Eric Ward. Under the gray sky of Columbus, a quiet home concealed a horror too brutal for imagination, one born of control, addiction, and rage. In late September 2021, 36-year-old Eric Ward murdered his romantic partner, 32-year-old Allison Lorenz. The crime shocked Ohio's capital, not only for its violence but for how it was discovered. Ward, who had a documented history of abuse against Lorenz, was already known to law enforcement. In 2019, he had beaten her so severely that police described her injuries as horrendous. Though convicted of aggravated assault, he was released in 2020. Prosecutors later said that release marked the beginning of a slow, inevitable spiral toward murder. Between September 25 and the 27th of September 2021, Ward's control turned fatal. Witness testimony revealed that Ward attacked Lorenz inside her own home, striking her repeatedly, including with boxing gloves he kept for sparring. Autopsy findings later showed multiple broken ribs and blunt force trauma across her body. As Lorenz began struggling to breathe, Ward pressed a wet cloth over her mouth until she died. Instead of reporting the death, he forced another woman, Heather Baker, also injured from his assaults, to help him hide the crime. Over the next day, the pair searched the internet for how to clean up blood and DNA removal. Ward and Baker purchased bleach, goggles, Tyvek suits, trash bags, a cobalt axe, and Corona shears from a hardware store. Baker, under Ward's orders, rented a U-Haul storage unit where they hid firearms, drugs, and blood-stained items. Ward then dismembered Lorenz's body in her garage. On the 29th of September 2021, SWAT officers executed a drug trafficking search warrant at the same residence, expecting narcotics but instead uncovering a crime scene described as beyond comprehension. Inside multiple trash bags, police found Lorenz's remains, alongside plastic sheeting, cleaning supplies, and the blood-stained axe. Ward and Baker were immediately taken into custody. Forensic evidence left no room for doubt. Ward's DNA was inside the protective suit used during the dismemberment. Lorenz's blood was found on the exterior. Investigators matched his fingerprints to several items recovered at the scene and documented injuries on his hands consistent with handling sharp tools. Cell phone data placed both Ward and Baker at the scene during the estimated time of death, and store receipts confirmed the purchase of the cleaning materials. Ward's first trial in July 2022 was declared a mistrial after a juror was threatened. At the retrial weeks later, Baker testified in exchange for a plea deal, describing how Ward forced her to participate. After only 2 hours of deliberation, the jury convicted Ward on all 18 charges, including aggravated murder, kidnapping, and gross abuse of a corpse. On August 6, Judge Julie Lynch sentenced him to life in prison without parole, plus 79 years. Lorenz's family expressed quiet devastation, saying no sentence could restore the life Ward destroyed. 3 lessons endure. Unchecked violence escalates until silence breaks, justice often arrives through chance, and evil hides behind ordinary walls. Even now, the house on Bashan Drive is remembered. Number 3. Jaheym Cheeks. Under the dim lights of a Columbus alley, a people's final moment played out in silence, cold, calculated, and captured on camera. On the 5th of March 2022, Brylan Butcher, a runaway from the Abraxas facility near Mansfield, Ohio, was executed by 23-year-old Jaheym Cheeks. The murder took place in the Hilltop neighborhood, where surveillance footage would later expose an act prosecutors called pure execution. Cheeks, who already had a violent criminal record, killed Butcher because the young man knew too much about his ongoing crimes, including stolen cars, drugs, and weapons. Butcher had run away 2 weeks earlier and reconnected with Cheeks, someone he trusted from Mansfield. That trust sealed his fate. Prosecutors revealed that Cheeks lured Butcher into a stolen vehicle under the guise of helping him. The two, along with co-defendant Justice Vereen, drove through the night from Mansfield to Columbus. In the early morning hours, they stopped in an alley off South Terrace Avenue. Security footage from nearby homes showed 2 silhouettes stepping out of the car. Moments later, a flash burst from the barrel of a gun. One figure fell instantly, the other ran back to the car. Cheeks had shot Butcher in the head at point-blank range, then dragged his body between trash cans. At dawn, a passerby searching for dumpsters discovered the teen's body and called 911. Brylan was pronounced dead from a single gunshot wound. Detectives from the Columbus Division of Police began piecing together what happened. Surveillance from multiple cameras, ballistic evidence, and digital tracking led investigators to identify Cheeks and Vereen as suspects. 3 days later, law enforcement in Tennessee stopped the same stolen vehicle at a gas station. Vereen confessed to being present during the killing and told police where Cheeks had forced him to throw away the murder weapon. Investigators recovered the gun from a trash can in Kimball, Tennessee, and confirmed through ballistics that it fired the bullet that killed Butcher. Further analysis of phone data revealed messages linking Cheeks to the crime and showing no remorse. Prosecutors said he later boasted that he would sleep fine after the killing. His record also showed a pattern of escalating violence, including burglary and assault convictions. A Franklin County grand jury indicted him on multiple counts of aggravated murder, and kidnapping, each carrying firearm specifications and repeat violent offender enhancements. At trial, prosecutors portrayed Cheeks as a man without empathy, arguing that he executed a defenseless boy to protect himself from exposure. The jury deliberated briefly before finding him guilty on all counts. On the 3rd of October 2024, Judge Kim Brown sentenced Cheeks to life in prison without the possibility of parole, calling the act a deliberate and cold-blooded execution. Prosecutors described the case as one of Franklin County's most heartless crimes. From this case, 3 lessons endure: trust misplaced can destroy innocence, silence should never demand death, and justice must outlast cruelty. And when the alley grew quiet again, Columbus still carried the echo of that single shot. Number 4, Deontae Daniel. In a quiet Columbus afternoon, the air inside a Cleveland Avenue apartment turned violent in seconds, leaving behind silence and smoke. On the 16th of September 2024, 28-year-old Cordell Tatney was shot multiple times inside an apartment in northeast Columbus. The man accused was 25-year-old Deontae Daniel, someone Tatney allegedly knew from an ongoing personal feud. What began as a neighborhood dispute ended as a calculated execution that took place in front of 2 small children. That afternoon around 2:45 p.m., Tatney had gone to visit a friend at the apartment complex on the 4,200 block of Cleveland Avenue, just south of Morse Road. Witnesses said Daniel arrived soon after with another unidentified man. The two briefly entered the apartment, then left, only to return minutes later. Outside, they waited, watching and preparing. One witness recalled Daniel pacing near the entrance, glancing toward the door. Then, gunfire erupted. Multiple witnesses later told investigators they heard the shots and saw Daniel run from the apartment holding a handgun. One claimed to hear him admit he had shot Tatney. Inside, Tatney lay on the floor suffering from multiple wounds. Paramedics rushed him to Ohio State University's Wexner Medical Center, but he was pronounced dead shortly after 4 p.m. Investigators noted that 2 toddlers, both under the age of 2, were present during the shooting, a detail that added to the tragedy and underlined the shooter's disregard for human life. Columbus police immediately launched a homicide investigation. Detectives collected physical evidence from the apartment, interviewed witnesses, and canvassed the surrounding area for surveillance footage. Within 24 hours, they identified Deontae Daniel as the prime suspect. Descriptions circulated citywide: an armed and dangerous man with a distinct neck tattoo, the number 28 in red ink over a broken heart. As police pieced together the timeline, they learned that Daniel had fled in a black Honda with temporary tags. The Columbus Division of Police issued a statewide bulletin and sought public assistance in locating both Daniel and the unnamed second suspect. Over the following week, detectives coordinated with regional task forces and tracked Daniel through phone and social media records. Their search ended 8 days later when deputies from the Franklin County Sheriff's Office arrested him without incident. At his first court appearance, prosecutors described Daniel as a flight risk and emphasized the risk he posed to the community. The judge set bond at $2 million. Daniel was booked into the Jackson Pike Correctional Facility, charged with murder, and ordered to remain in custody pending trial. The case drew limited public comment, though law enforcement officials stressed that the presence of children at the scene underscored the recklessness of the crime. Community members expressed fatigue over repeated acts of gun violence in the city's northeast corridor. 3 lessons endure: grudges escalate faster than reason, anger leaves no room for mercy, and every witness to violence carries its scar. And when the apartment lights dimmed, only the echoes of that feud remained. Number 5, Andrew Mitchell. Power grants trust, but when power corrupts, even the badge meant to protect can become a weapon of fear. Andrew Mitchell's career once symbolized authority within the Columbus Division of Police. After more than 30 years on the force, including time in the city's now-defunct Vice Unit, his name became synonymous with betrayal. Between 2017 and 2018, Mitchell used his position to detain, threaten, and exploit women engaged in sex work, crimes that would later dismantle his unit and stain the reputation of the department he served. The federal investigation into Mitchell revealed 2 distinct periods of abuse. In July 2017, while patrolling in plain clothes and driving an unmarked car, Mitchell approached a woman he believed to be a sex worker. Pretending to check for warrants, he handcuffed her to the doorknob inside his vehicle and drove her to a remote lot near dumpsters, where he kept her detained before finally releasing her. Later that same year, he repeated the tactic with another woman, identifying himself as a vice officer, threatening jail, and driving her to a secluded park. Both women later described being restrained and terrified, certain they would not survive the encounter. Though Mitchell ultimately pleaded guilty only to kidnapping and obstruction, prosecutors said the evidence strongly suggested sexual coercion. A year later, Mitchell's name would surface in a far deadlier case, the shooting of 23-year-old Donna Castleberry. During an undercover vice operation in August 2018, Mitchell picked up Castleberry in his unmarked car and parked in an alley, positioning the vehicle so the passenger door pressed against a wall. When she questioned his identity, fearing he was a predator, she cut his hand with a knife in panic. Mitchell responded by firing 6 rounds, 3 of which struck her fatally. Instead of calling 911, he texted another officer for help. Castleberry died within minutes. By March 2019, Mitchell faced both state and federal charges. The state indicted him for Castleberry's murder, while the federal government charged him with civil rights violations and obstruction of justice. Investigators found that Mitchell had ordered associates to clean one of his rental properties with bleach and remove evidence to hinder an FBI search. His first murder trial in 2022 ended in a hung jury. A year later, he was acquitted of all state charges after jurors accepted his self-defense claim. But the federal case remained. In December 2023, Mitchell pleaded guilty to 2 counts of depriving individuals of their civil rights under color of law and 1 count of obstruction. On the 9th of May 2024, he was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison, receiving credit for 5 years already served. Officials condemned his conduct as a nightmarish breach of trust. Donna Castleberry's family said no verdict could restore what was taken. 3 lessons remain: power without accountability breeds abuse, silence shields corruption, and justice delayed still leaves a mark. And when the sirens fade, the echoes of betrayal still linger in Columbus. Number 6. Stephanie Demetrius. Under the calm rhythm of Columbus, darkness crept quietly into a classroom, and what began as education turned into conspiracy. In March 2025, investigators uncovered a shocking murder-for-hire plot involving 44-year-old Stephanie Demetrius, a staff member at the Academy for Urban Scholars High School in Columbus, Ohio. Authorities allege Demetrius attempted to orchestrate the killing of her husband, Stephen Demetrius, by soliciting a student. Prosecutors say the motive was rooted in control and resentment. The plan unfolded on March 26. Demetrius approached a juvenile student, offering $2,000 to carry out the killing and handing over a $250 down payment. She provided the teen with her husband's schedule, noting when their children would be out of the house. When the student asked about neighbors hearing gunfire, she allegedly dismissed the concern, claiming they don't care about her neighbors. Court filings later revealed a disturbing history: past incidents where Demetrius had stabbed her husband with scissors, tried to run him over, and even set a basement fire in their home. The plot came to light when the student's mother discovered alarming text messages and alerted authorities. Investigators from the Columbus Division of Police obtained a recorded call between Demetrius and the student, during which she confirmed she still owed the remaining $1,500 for the job. Detectives quickly secured warrants, tracing messages and digital records that corroborated the student's story. Sergeant James Fuqua publicly commended the parent for reporting the evidence, calling her intervention critical in preventing a tragedy. On April 1, officers arrested Demetrius and booked her into the Franklin County Jail. Police described her actions as an attempt to groom a young person into committing murder. Forensic specialists collected digital evidence from her phone, along with cash found in her possession believed to be part of the payment. 10 days later, a grand jury indicted her on 1 count of conspiracy to commit aggravated murder and 1 count of violating a protection order. At her April 3 arraignment, Demetrius appeared before a Franklin County judge. Her bond was set at $150,000, and she was ordered to stay away from both her husband and the juvenile involved. Her attorney denied the allegations, claiming the accusations were fabricated and insisting she would prove her innocence in court. The case remains in its early stages, with a preliminary hearing scheduled for April 11. As proceedings began, the school moved swiftly to terminate Demetrius's employment, emphasizing its commitment to student safety. Law enforcement praised the student's mother for her decisive action, while the victim, Stephen Demetrius, declined to speak publicly, focusing instead on protecting his children. 3 lessons endure. Evil often hides behind ordinary faces, vigilance saves lives before justice does, and silence can be the deadliest accomplice of all. Somewhere in Columbus, beneath its quiet streets, the echo of that phone call still lingers, a warning unheeded until almost too late. Number 7. Jamarion, Fredrae, Evans-Bennett, and Dionta, Davon, Hughes. It began as a winter night of errands, and ended as a brutal reminder of how quickly cruelty can turn ordinary places into crime scenes. On the 6th of December 2023, 53-year-old Donald Donnie Smith Jr. stopped at the Kroger supermarket on South High Street in Columbus, Ohio. Within an hour, he would be beaten so severely in the parking lot that he would never wake again. The attack, prosecutors later said, was an act of pure violence, committed without reason, by 3 young men who seemed to find pleasure in the pain they caused. Just after 7 p.m., a disturbance broke out inside the Kroger. Security footage later showed 3 young men, 19-year-old Dionta Davon Hughes, 19-year-old Jamarion Fredrae Evans-Bennett, and Jaden A.G., arguing with customers and being escorted outside by store staff. Instead of leaving, they lingered near the entrance. When Smith exited the store a short time later, the group followed. Witnesses told investigators that the 3 surrounded Smith in the parking lot, striking him until he collapsed. Even as he lay motionless on the ground, they continued punching, kicking, and stomping on him. One bystander reported seeing the attackers laughing as they delivered the final blows. The violence ended only when a witness carrying a firearm shouted for them to stop. The teens fled across the lot and drove away in a red vehicle. Police officers arrived around 8:07 p.m. to find Smith unconscious, bleeding from the head. Paramedics rushed him to Ohio Health Grant Medical Center, where doctors performed emergency brain surgery. For 12 days, his family waited and prayed, but Smith succumbed to his injuries on December 18, just a week before Christmas. Detectives from the Columbus Division of Police began piecing together the assault. Surveillance footage from Kroger and nearby businesses confirmed the sequence of events. Witnesses identified the suspects, describing their laughter and flight from the scene. Initially charged with felonious assault, Hughes, Evans, Bennett, and A.G. were arrested 2 days after Smith's death, their charges elevated to murder. The case transferred from the robbery unit to homicide detectives, who noted the deliberate nature of the ambush. On the 3rd of January 2024, a Franklin County judge set bond for both Hughes and Evans-Bennett at $1 million each. Prosecutors cited the viciousness of the crime and the apparent enjoyment the defendants took in the attack. Both pleaded not guilty. The third suspect, A.G., remained in detention. All 3 awaited trial in separate facilities, while investigators continued gathering evidence. Smith's partner, Nicole Evans, who shared 2 young children with him, called the killing a senseless act that destroyed their family. She described Smith as a gentleman who loved sports, race cars, and spending time with his kids. A fundraising campaign was created to cover funeral costs and help support the children he left behind. 3 lessons remain. Violence born of boredom corrodes humanity, justice must protect the innocent from cruelty, and laughter should never accompany death. And when the parking lot grows quiet again, the echoes of that night still hang in the cold air. Number 8. Chrystian Foster and Dwayne Cummings. In a city known for its nightlife, one act of senseless violence exposed the dark side of its streets. On the 5th of September 2022, outside the Julep Bar in Columbus's Short North District, 37-year-old bartender and Father Gregory Coleman Jr. was beaten so brutally that he never regained consciousness. The assault, caught on video, involved 2 men working as security, Dwayne Cummings and Chrystian Foster, and would later lead to murder convictions, a multi-million-dollar civil verdict, and the closure of the bar itself. That Labor Day weekend, tensions flared when Coleman, who worked nearby, was confronted by Foster on the sidewalk in front of Julep. According to court documents, Foster told him to move, sparking an argument. Surveillance and cell phone footage captured what followed. Coleman turned to face Foster just as Cummings struck him from the side, an unexpected blow that knocked him unconscious instantly. His head slammed against the pavement, and while he lay motionless, both men continued hitting and kicking him. Witnesses later described the attack as merciless, 2 trained men assaulting a defenseless victim. Police were called around 2:30 a.m. Officers arrived to find Coleman unresponsive on the ground. Paramedics rushed him to a nearby hospital, where surgeons fought to save him. For nearly 2 weeks, Coleman lay in a coma, supported by a ventilator as his family kept vigil. He died on the 18th of September 2022, leaving behind a 10-year-old daughter and a devastated community. Detectives with the Columbus Division of Police quickly identified the suspects through viral video footage shared online. Arrest warrants were issued while Coleman was still alive, initially for attempted murder. Those charges escalated to murder after his death. Cummings was arrested on September 21, and Foster surrendered shortly after. Both men were discovered to have extensive prior criminal histories, including violent and weapons-related offenses. Their trials took place separately. Cummings was convicted of murder in February 2024 and sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Foster was found guilty of murder and felonious assault on the 10th of May 2024 and received a nearly identical sentence of 15 years to life. The courtroom offered a brief moment of closure for Coleman's family. His mother said that while justice had been served, nothing could repair the loss that shattered their home. A year later, accountability took a broader form. Coleman's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the bar and its owners, alleging negligent hiring and training. Evidence showed neither Cummings nor Foster had undergone proper background checks. In July 2025, a jury awarded the family $27 million, one of the largest wrongful death verdicts in Franklin County history. The bar owners were deemed 80% responsible, the guards 10% each. 3 lessons linger. Violence fueled by arrogance leaves only loss. Neglecting background checks, risks, lives, and justice, though delayed, reshapes accountability. And when the music stopped on High Street, the silence left behind spoke louder than any verdict. Number 9. Brian Golsby. A quiet campus night turned tragic when trust met terror under the glow of city lights. On the 8th of February 2017, 21-year-old Ohio State University student Reagan Tokes left her shift at Bodega in Columbus's Short North neighborhood, heading to her car and to what should have been an ordinary night. Minutes later, she was abducted by Brian Golsby, a recently released sex offender wearing a GPS ankle monitor. Her murder would expose critical failures in Ohio's parole system and reshape state law. Golsby, then 29, had a violent record that included robbery and attempted rape. He had been released from prison just 3 months earlier after serving 6 years and was living in transitional housing under state supervision. Despite multiple parole violations and 6 robberies committed in the weeks before the killing, no action had been taken against him. That night, GPS records later showed him loitering near Bodega for nearly an hour before targeting Tokes. As she walked to her car, Golsby forced her inside at gunpoint. Over the next hour, he made her drive to several ATMs, attempting withdrawals that were declined. Surveillance confirmed stops at Chase Bank and Huntington Bank. Afterward, Golsby drove Tokes to an alley, where investigators believe he raped her. He then compelled her to drive to Scioto Grove Metro Park, where he forced her to undress, led her into a field, and shot her twice in the head. He took her car, purse, and wallet, later gifting them to his girlfriend before discarding the weapon and trying unsuccessfully to burn the vehicle. When Tokes failed to return home, her family contacted police. The next morning, her naked body was discovered near the park's entrance. Detectives soon located her car abandoned near Golsby's residence. Inside were cigarette butts and DNA traces matching him. His GPS tracker placed him at each key location of the crime. Gunshot residue was found on his clothes, and DNA from the rape kit confirmed the match. Arrested on February 11, Golsby confessed to parts of the crime but invented a fictitious accomplice in an attempt to shift blame. That story quickly unraveled. The trial began on the 5th of March 2018, drawing statewide attention. Prosecutors described a deliberate act of predation. The defense cited his traumatic upbringing and mental instability. On March 13, Reagan's 23rd birthday, the jury convicted Golsby on all counts, including aggravated murder, rape, and kidnapping. Jurors could not reach a unanimous death penalty decision, resulting in a life sentence without parole. Judge Mark Surratt condemned Golsby for showing no mercy and spared him only because of the divided jury. Reagan's family mourned with grace, establishing the Reagan Tokes Memorial Foundation and working toward legislative reform. In 2018, the Ohio legislature passed the Reagan-Tokes Act, mandating indefinite sentencing for violent felons and improving GPS and parole monitoring statewide. 3 lessons endure: oversight failures can cost lives, data without diligence is useless, and justice must evolve from tragedy. And when the city sleeps, her memory endures as the law that bears her name. Columbus has told its stories of cruelty and consequence, of victims remembered and killers caged. But these cases are only the beginning. From the alleys of Hilltop to the quiet suburbs near Cleveland Avenue, the next story may already be unfolding tonight. And if you want to journey deeper into the shadows of real American crime, subscribe to Justice Reversed and hit the bell icon now, so you'll be the first to witness the next chapter of truth, tragedy, and the pursuit of justice. The darkness never sleeps, and neither do we.